Many of us here in Toronto know full well how amazing of a basketball city this is. You might even know that a Canadian created the game, though elsewhere in the basketball universe, this might as well be the North Pole where Santa drops threes. Well, today, with the world's press arriving for Media Day ahead of the first ever NBA final game to be played outside of the U.S., we set out to see if there's any misconceptions about the True North strong and free.
It's a lot colder than I thought it was going to be, first of all. It's actually a lot more like London's weather than I thought as well.
The last time you were here was for the NBA All-Star game.
Yes.
Was it a little cold outside?
It was quite cold, I would say. I'm happy with a little drizzle today at 50s. You know, it was minus 20 at that time. I actually didn't get to know the city that much because everything was through the tunnels.
It appears Toronto's weather isn't just top of mind for those of us who live here. For the Canadian contingent of basketball media, they've fielded every crazy climate question you can imagine from their international colleagues.
People think it snows 12 months a year. I think people think people live in igloos in Toronto.
For me personally, I've kind of always had the standard response like, well, the weather didn't seem to matter. Michael Jordan in Chicago, which is no better or worse than Toronto, or to Larry Bird and the Boston Celtics and the weather in Boston for all these years. I think people forget that it's the East Coast. If
trying to pour hot water on images of snow globes isn't enough, Sportsnet's Eric Smith has also had to stick handle his fair share of cliches.
Oh, Canadian, am I going to hear oot and a boot, which I don't think I've ever said in my life. I don't think it's ever come out of my mouth.
Though with Toronto now in focus, it turns out there's plenty of love abroad for the T-Dot.
Honestly, I think British people probably resonate with the Toronto Raptors a lot more than they do maybe some of the other places. Obviously, we know the global teams, the Golden State Warriors, the New York Knicks, but the Raptors are loved in England, and they're loved across the whole of the UK. They really are.
I'm from Argentina originally. We think Canada is an up-and-coming powerhouse in basketball.
What do you feel it means, not just for the Raptors, but the city of Toronto, to have the global spotlight on our city and perhaps putting to rest some of the misconceptions about Toronto and basketball in this country?
It's incredible how diverse it is, and we're going to continue to grow this and live this in this city. I said it when I came here. I know this city will win, and it's not me or anybody. There's something about it here, and sports, it comes around. Many cities will win, and Toronto will win too.
And let's hope the winning starts tomorrow night. Now, as we look ahead at this series, Game 3 is going to be broadcast right here on City TV with tip-off at 8:30 p.m. And you can listen to Game 4 on 680 News starting at 9 p.m. And the NBA Finals has thrust the T-Dot into a spotlight of epic proportions with journalists from nearly every continent across the globe touching down. And it's not just the Raptors who are at center court, it's also the city, with Tourism Toronto saying that it's almost impossible to put a dollar value on this type of worldwide global exposure.
Pour nous, d'abord, c'est d'être en finale.
We can reach the world easy from here, from Canada, and we're happy to be the global team that represents the NBA.
So the NBA confirms that TV and radio networks from Brazil, China, France, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Latin America, Poland, Spain, Taiwan, Australia, Estonia, Hong Kong, New Zealand, and of course Canada are covering the games and Game 1 right here in Toronto. Can we put a dollar figure on just what this would mean if we were to buy this kind of airtime, or is it just almost too big to quantify?
You can't buy this kind of airtime. This is, as a marketer, what you want to be is part of the conversation. It's tough. There's so much competition for the customer's mind and to share their mind right now. So when you're part of one of the dominant news stories of the day in such a positive way, that shows your city in such a positive way, that's ultimately what you need. And when you can reach this scale of global audience, it's a tremendous, tremendous win for the city.
We've had, a World Cup of Hockey. We've had the Blue Jays back in the early 90s with their World Series runs. But have we ever had this much media, this much attention descend on Toronto?
I think any of the previous sports events have been important within the audience that follows that sports event. The NBA is a pop culture phenomenon, and it reaches a lot further than that. And it has not only a global audience, but the celebrity factor that isn't there in some of the other sporting events. And in baseball, we haven't been in a championship since the early 90s. The whole media landscape has changed since then. So this is really a special opportunity, and I don't think we've had anything quite like it in Toronto.
And the social media aspect raises the bar to a whole different level. Get this, the NBA by themselves have more than 1.5 billion likes and followers.